We don't call it big church. It's just called church. All of us are doing church together. So here's what I need. To help us with the kids being here, I'm going to ask for any aged kid from about 7 to 11. 7 to 11. The first 7 that get up here, you get to come up here, and we're going to do something together. First 7. Yes! All right. Hold. Time out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, the rest of you go back. Go back to mom and dad. Sorry, this is not. I need 7. What happened? What happened here? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. Awesome.
5.
All right, so here's what I need you guys to do. I wanted to do, you know what? Why don't you guys come up here? I don't know if you guys have seen this new dance or not, but I saw this dance on the cruise. You guys know what the dance is, right? Yeah. All right, so everyone spread out. Spread out. They have no idea what I'm going to ask them to do, but I don't know if you guys, like culture, we have to stay in touch, right, with our young people, because these are the people that are going to be leading church in 20 years. This is scary, all right? Come on up here. Don't be shy. Now, some of you guys know this dance. It's called the floss dance. All right, ready? On the count of 3, I want you guys to do the floss as best as you've ever done it. Does everyone know the floss? Do you know the floss? You guys don't know the floss? All right. How many know the floss? All right, you 3 get to do the floss. All right, so you get a head start on this game. Go ahead and do the floss on the count of 3. Do it. Whatever that is. All right, that's awesome. Okay, so it kind of looks like you're, wiping your butt after you get out of the shower. That's what it looks like to me. Awesome. So here's what we're going to do. I want you guys to get down on the floor because you can't do this up here as much as I wanted to. You can't do this up here. So go down on the floor, and I want you to think about where home is for you. All right, that's what we're going to do. I want you to think about where your butts are parked after I start preaching. All right, where do you go? I want you to visualize where you're going to go, because on the count of 3 for a full minute, you're going to spin in a circle as fast as you can. All right, yeah. Some of you guys are like, what? Yes, that's what we're going to do. I want you to spin in a circle as fast as you can for a full minute. But I need you guys to step away from the communion table. You're welcome, moms and dads. No, you guys step over here, step over here, step over here. And then the first one to get back to mom and dad and sit down after the full minute, okay, you guys are the winner. You're the victor, all right? So give yourself some room. Spread out, spread out, spread out, spread out, spread out. Now, if you sat over here, you might not want to be over there, Thatcher. Just saying, all right? Here we go. Full minute. Yeah, that's what I thought. I'll wait on you. Okay, are you ready? On the count of 3, you're going to spin as fast as you can in a circle, and then after that, you're going to go sit down. And I'll say go as soon as the minute's over. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Spin, spin. Keep going. Uh-oh. Keep going. Keep going. We've lost 3 of them. 4 of them. Faster, 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 faster. Go. Who won? All right, come on up here, buddy. Hey, all of you who came up and participated, come up here. I got a little prize for you, all right? This is compliments of Grandma Wilma. Come on up. Come on up. I used to sit with Grandma Wilma and was bored to death in church all the time, all right? Because the preacher would just keep talking and keep yakking. And so the only thing that I liked church about was the gum from Grandma, right? Oh, yeah. So I'm going to give you guys a piece of my gum. This comes from my secret stash, all right? Here you go. Here you go. Guys, would you give them a round of applause? They did a great job. And you won, right? Okay, you get the rest of it. There you go. Share with mom and dad. Man, I tell you what, the younger you are, the more exhilarating circles can be, the more exhilarating and more fun and exciting it is to spin. I remember when my children were younger, one of the things that we loved to do was grab them by the arms and what? Twirl them in a circle. And then I found out as I aged that was actually a dangerous thing. And the reason it's dangerous is because you can dislocate their shoulders. I didn't realize that. We didn't dislocate any of our shoulders because, since I had heard that information. Hey, buddy. All right. Yep, I understand completely. So as our children started to age, we wanted to save their shoulders because we all have bad shoulders as Rollins. So we started to grab them by the ankles and twirl them. All right? Just kidding. Don't do that at home. Don't do that at home. The younger you are, the more exhilarating circles can be. And if you're brand new to what's going on here at Rising Sun, and why are we talking about circles, and why do we have kids spinning in circles up front? It's because for the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been talking about a new series called Circles of Change. Each one of us go through a cycle. Each one of us will go through seasons of change. We navigate change. One of the things that we've learned is we cannot stay where we are, because as soon as we start to adjust to where we've been, another change happens in our life, and we have to adjust again. So we cannot stay where we are. We have to constantly be letting go of the things that we've learned and always modifying and improving and evolving who we are. But the thing that's kind of captivated my thought in this series is the younger you are, the more exciting the circles can be. But as you age, this weird and interesting thing for me happens. I start to be more mindful, more cautious, more reserved about those seasons of changes or those circles of changes and those transitions that we all go through, because you see the bumps and you see the bruises and you see the pointy objects in life, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I just want to play it safe. I just want to stay right here and stay put. There's probably no better example of this in my life than when my wife and I were first kind of married and we first had some children. I think we had a couple of kids at the time. And I took Mandy to a park. We had not been in a park since the time we were dating. Mandy and I love to going to parks. Do you want me to get another mic? You know what? I'll grab that yellow one. Check, 1, 2. Perfect. All right. Kind of feel like it's a little bit more authority anyway, right? Ooh. So when we were first married, I decided to take Mandy back to some of our old roots and go back to the park. And I remember our kids were pretty young, and one of the things that Mandy loved to do, and I kind of love to do too, but I never really found somebody that could accelerate me to the point of excitement, was the merry-go-round. Anyone with me on the merry-go-round? Man, I could get that thing going. I could just move that merry-go-round as fast as anyone else in the world, I thought. And so Mandy got on the merry-go-round, and we started twirling, and I started going. I kept pushing. And there's a timing element to that, right? Because if you reach perfectly, you can grab that next rung, and you could really give it some power and some oomph. Well, I thought Mandy was having a great time. She loves it when I talk about her in the sermons, by the way. So I have to give her $1 every time I talk about her in the sermons. I'm a poor man. So I start twirling her with the merry-go-round. Little did I know that she was starting to get sick. And it reminded me of another story from when we first were married. Right after Mandy and I got married, May 30th, 1998. Pretty poor, college students, etc. We did not really have a honeymoon per se. So after we got married in Mason City, our honeymoon adventure was Adventureland itself, all right? And so some of you know where I'm going with this. They had this ride that I think they just got rid of a couple of years ago. It was called what? Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Silly Silo. How many of you are Silly Silo junkies? You love it. And here's what the ride is, in case some of you who are older and a little bit more reserved about these changes, like I am now. You strap yourself to this little tube, and it starts to spin incredibly fast, and all of a sudden, the centrifugal force, and I'll explain that a little bit later, throws you back against the wall. And as soon as it has you back against the wall, something magical happens. The floor drops out, and you're just stuck. Ugh. She loved that ride. She could go on that ride forever. I couldn't wait to go on this ride because I really had only experienced it one time. But the very first ride we decided to go on wasn't the Silly Silo. It was this other weird, spinny little contraption that I hate and I have nightmares about now. We got in this little thing, in this little cage, and they strap you in, and I'm a pretty good-sized guy. And so as soon as I got strapped in, I thought, this isn't good.
And it starts spinning pretty quickly and, pretty fast, and pretty soon those cars start to float up. Again, centrifugal force. And it starts to float up. And then all of a sudden, there's this hydraulic system that brings the whole mechanism up. Anyone else know what I'm talking about? What's that ride called? The devil. What? What's it called? Whatever that is. It's the devil. That's what I call it. And as soon as I got out of that ride, this was our honeymoon. Remember, I'm pretty excited about the next chapter in my life, the next season in my life. And I can't wait to, have a great day with my new bride at Adventureland. And that's the very first ride we go on. And I am not kidding you. As soon as we got out of that ride, this old guy started throwing chunks everywhere. The rest of the day was shot. It's a great honeymoon, Steve Rowland. Yes, it was. It was horrible. But it starts to illustrate for me. I started to learn that the things I used to really enjoy in life, man, I really struggle now in life. Those seasons that were exhilarating are not so exhilarating anymore. Now I meet them with a lot of apprehension. Now I meet them with a lot of reservation. Why is that? See, change has the same effect for us. It doesn't matter if it's a merry-go-round, if it's the devil ride that I'm talking about, the silly silo. Change has the same effect. We all go through different seasons of change, and some of us approach that season of change with great anticipation and excitement. But the older we get, we seem to back off of that anticipation. We seem to back off of that excitement, and we get to be a little bit more reserved in those times. So whether you're approaching change, the next change in your life, whether it's a marriage, a new child, a new job, a financial change that's coming, maybe it's geographic change, maybe you're getting ready to move, maybe it's a vacation, whatever the next season is in your life, whether you're anticipating it with great excitement or you're dreading it with great fear, it has the same result on each of us. And that's what we've been talking about the last 3 or 4 weeks, is just what are the lessons that we can learn from this? See, the bad news for many of us is we've learned as we age that the more I try, the harder I try to hold on to life, because I feel like sometimes it's spinning out of control, the worse it gets. The more I let go, the more I just kind of sit back and enjoy, the easier it comes. Some of us are holding on by a thread, and I mean that not just literally, figuratively, metaphorically, spiritually, financially, all those other lees. We're there. We just don't know how we're going to make it through today. And you've been trying for way too long to try to hold on to life by yourself. And that's the bad news. The secret is you don't have to. You can't hold on by yourself. It's literally impossible for you to try to hold life tight and make sense of life. Those changes are going to be constant. The good news is you've not been designed to. That's not what God ever intended for your life to be, was just to hold on for the next Tuesday, to hold on for the next season, to hold on until things get better. That's not what God wanted in your life. That's not what He designed you for, and quite matter-of-factly, you're not able to. No matter how much you resist this, and no matter how much you try to hold on, the more you do, the more frustrated you're going to be. The only one that can hold on to us tight is Christ. So whether we're enjoying the circles of change or whether we just can't stand them right now, we all experience the circle. We all experience the spin. We all experience the change. It's inevitable. Changes come no matter what. And what do others need the most as they're experiencing that change? Because that's one of the questions that I think we need this series should try to help answer for us. When we see people spinning around, what's our response to them? Stop! Yeah, don't hit your head on that corner. What's our response to ourselves when we catch ourselves spinning in that same cycle? Mandy and I just got back from a cruise here about a month ago. And we went to 7 Mile Beach in Cayman Islands. And while we were there, it's one of the better places to go, I guess, in the world. It's one of the top 100 places to go. And while we were there, we saw this jet ski. and it was pulling this big old floating chair, not just a tube. Some of you have seen those tubes. It had this chair of 4 people that 4 people could sit in, and this jet ski was the cream of the crop. And man, it would go out in the ocean, and you would watch this driver with great expertise and precision start to cut and start to spin. And I started to observe something that we all know but maybe have forgotten or don't even consider. And that's the closer to the spin, the closer to the center, the slower the spin is. The further out in the circle, the faster you spin. Why is that? Why is that? And what do we do when we see people who are outside of the circle of Christ, outside of the circle of the community, who are just crazy in life? What's our response to them? You see, Paul experiences a very similar concept, a very similar tension in his life. And one of the things that he saw was this community in Colossae, and he really had never met this church. He had just been told about this church by Epaphras, and Epaphras was a guy that he had actually preached to in Ephesus. And Epaphras was so radically transformed by Paul's preaching that when Paul went back to Jerusalem, when he was imprisoned because he brought supposedly Gentiles into the temple, and now he's locked away in Rome, Epaphras goes back to Rome and he says, Paul, I need your help. I need you to help me. Our congregation, we're drowning. Not only are the individuals experiencing great change and transformation in their culture, in their own personal lives, but also just in their city. Colossae was this town strategically placed in modern-day Turkey, kind of in the middle. And it was right in the center of a trading route. This thing was phenomenal. This whole town was great. And as they walked through, or as they experienced their culture, they were seeing great transformation, because in the past, what happened was they were the epicenter of the world. All travelers came through Colossae. They were known for some fabric, some purple wool that they had become known for. In fact, the name Colossae means purple wool. That's what they were known for. This was their entire commerce. Everyone in that town, they had it figured out. And they were making some pretty good coin and pretty good profit on the people who would travel through. In fact, Xerxes, 600 BC, would come through Colossae, and it was one of his favorite places to live. But in Paul's day, 600 years after, they were all dried up. The coal mining town was gone. Their main industry was gone. And people's lives began to transform. People's lives began to kind of spin out of control. And Epaphras comes to Paul and he says, Paul, I need your help. And not only from an economic standpoint are we struggling, but also from an identity standpoint are we struggling. I went back to my hometown. I told my hometown all about the resurrection of Christ, all about the hope of Christ. And many people, including this one guy by the name of Philemon, who was a slave owner, gave his life to Christ because now he found hope in who Jesus was. But what I'm seeing my community do, Paul, is they're borrowing from all of the other mystic religions around them. They're very spiritual people. They're borrowing from the Judaizers, from the Jewish clan. They're also borrowing from the barbarians and the Syntyches and all these other groups around them. They think that there's some great stuff happening that they are starting to borrow, and they still love Jesus, but they're just adopting other principles. Paul, what do I do? And Paul addresses this question on what to do through the circles of change. Now, before we jump into what Paul says to Colossae, I just want to remind us of where we've been as a church. Because the very first thing that we saw in the circles of change is this, that through the constant changes, we have to look at the constant lines. These are the things that we cognitively know that sometimes we forget. That through those changes, through those different seasons, there are constant lines that we have to find. And in those constant lines, God is trying to reveal something to us that's hidden deep within us. That God uses those seasons of changes to identify the hidden nests in our life. The third thing that we saw last week, we went all the way back to Kings, 2 Kings chapter 9. We heard about this guy by the name of Jehu. And Jehu had been destined for great things. In fact, this crazy prophet by the name of Elijah comes and foretells that in 10 years, something's amazing going to happen to your life. You're going to be elevated to the position of king. And he had a date with destiny. But what did he do in those 10 years? So what is he supposed to do in the waiting time? What's he supposed to do in those moments where he's not arrived yet? And the third thing that we saw last week in this whole series, remember? Remember where we were with Jehu? With Jehu, it was God is using the moments of today to train us for tomorrow. That the lessons that we all learn today are the things that God wants to prepare us for tomorrow. That we cannot stay where we are. And for us to stay where we are, we lose sight of where we could be. Because the moments of tomorrow will always reflect the decisions of today. So as we go into the rest of this study with Colossians and kind of conclude this series, I want us to really kind of meditate on those ideas that God is using today, whatever we're experiencing today, to train us for something better tomorrow. So it's okay for us to kind of live in the tension of, do we live for the moment or do we live in the moment? For us to live in the moment, we have to really be thinking about our past and almost living for our past. Living that today our decisions are going to ultimately affect tomorrow. So jump in with me, if you will, to Colossians chapter 1. This is a common passage for a lot of people. We all kind of know this before. Maybe you've had some experience with it. But Paul really leans in and he tells Epaphras to go back to his community. And not only just go back to his community, but he actually writes another letter for a guy in Colossae by the name of Philemon. And he's writing about a guy by the name of Onesimus, his runaway slave, because Onesimus is with Paul at this point too. So this letter, this little bitty letter, is packed full of some very rich history that we cannot afford to miss. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. Paul says he, meaning Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Do you hear that? If you want to know who God is in your life, if you want to know what God's trying to do in your life, start to follow who Jesus is in your own. Start to see who Jesus was. Jesus is full of mercy. He's full of compassion. He's full of control. And Paul goes on to lay this out. He says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things whether in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers, rulers or authorities. That little section there, Paul is teasing out a cultural reality that they live in. Because they were all about the mystics. They were all about the invisible and the things of the authorities that they could not see. And Paul is saying to this group that he's never met, Jesus is in charge of everything. All of those seasons that we go through, all of those changes, he has in the palm of his hand. He completely understands what's coming. He's not surprised by what we're going to be dealing with. All things were created by him and for him, Paul says. And then I want you to really zero in on verse 17. I want you to spend just a little bit of time looking at this. He is before all things. I want you to say that with me. Jesus is before all things. I want you to say that. Jesus is before all things. I want you to say that one more time. Jesus is before all things. So whatever it is that you're facing today, whatever it is that you're facing next week, I want you to know that Jesus is before all things. No matter what you're going into, no matter what season you're walking into, Jesus is before all things. I want you to say that one more time. Jesus is before all things. You're halfway there. You've already got another memory verse in your arsenal. Colossians chapter 1, verse 17. Jesus is before all things. Jesus is before all things. And in him, all things, what? All things hold together. Now say it with me. Jesus is before all things. And in him, all things hold together. He is holding you tight in the palm of his hand. He is holding your situation. He's holding your circumstance. Whatever it is that you're facing, whether it's a relationship conflict, whether it's a transition in work, whether it's a marital issue, whether it's knowing how to parent your child, Jesus is before all of that. And he is holding it. He's holding on to you. He is the guy at the center of the circle, spinning. And he's drawing you closer to him. He is there with you in your conflict. He is there with you in your situation. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Let's keep reading, verse 18. And he is the head of the body. He is the head of the church. Jesus is in charge of what's happening here. And God has used and wants to place the church as the epicenter for where life can happen. If you feel disconnected from God, if you feel like that God's not answering you, there's a strong chance you're not connected to the church. And I'm not talking about Rising Sun Church. I'm talking about the Big C Church. You cannot have a relationship with Christ and a lack of relationship with the body. It does not work. They go hand in hand. They're simultaneous. They are connected. You want to know what God's doing in your life? You want to see where God is? Get plugged in his local church. Get plugged in where he's at. Start seeing lives change. Start being on the front lines and in the trenches of prayer and of spiritual warfare with people. You'll start to see God's hand pop everywhere. I could name, just looking at many of you, I could name some of your situations and I could see what God is doing in your life. How involved are you in what God's doing in others? You want to feel closer to Christ? Be closer to the church. He is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning of the firstborn among the dead, so that in everything he might have supremacy. For God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven. And I love this next phrase, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Jerry kind of touched on it during our communion time today. You start to study the word peace, and you start to see that word pop all the way through the entire narrative. We have been in conflict since the beginning. We have been in transition since the beginning. We have been in change since the beginning. And many of you, I get it because I'm there sometimes. I just want to rest. I want to know what that Psalm 23 thing's all about. I want to know what it means to be led to green pastures and still waters. I want to know what it's like to have a table set before my enemies in front of me, that my cup might overflow. I want to know what it's like that in all things I bring to Jesus. Like Philippians chapter 4, verse 7 says, that through prayer and supplication, through thanksgiving, through praise, I bring all my stuff to him, and then all of a sudden, my mind is blown by the peace that he can give me. How is it that in the middle of chaos, I can just say, Jesus, you're it? How is it that in the middle of the spin, in the middle of the crisis, in the middle of the change, I can just let go? Because it's hard. Because I desperately want the thing that I can't have, it seems. See, only by his blood do we have peace with our Father. And many of you, the reason you're living in conflict or the reason that you're living in stress, you've never made peace with your Creator. You just don't understand what that's like. You're constantly trying to hold on tight to life. It was through the sacrifice of his Son that he gave us a gift of life, that we might have life to the fullest. That doesn't mean life's going to be easy. That just means that through the situations that we can't figure out, we should have an element of peace in the storm because he has it. Because he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. That he's holding on to me. There's this interesting scientific thing, and I'm kind of the puppet master, right? So you're going to have to talk to Bill Gamble about this, but there's this interesting collision of cells that happens in our body, which I just think is incredibly fascinating. There's this cell adhesion molecule that every one of you have, and we have anywhere from 60,000 to 1 million different cell adhesions molecules called laminin. This is a scientific diagram of laminin in our body. And what it does is everything that's held together in my body, whether it's the skin, whether it's the organs, whether it's the way that my mind works, whether it's the way that my physical body works, this is running through me. This is the rebar of the construction of my life. This is the super glue of the project of my life. God he has intimately put this in and interwoven this into not just me, but all of you. We all have an element of laminin in our body. And this is just the scientific model. But if you want to really see the electronic microscopic model, here it is. And I just think it's fascinating that God has put his DNA in each one of us. Remember the verse that we've been looking at every week that we've been here, is that God has set eternity in the hearts and minds of all men. We have a distinct desire to be drawn back home And this, just on a scientific level, is evidence of the fact that he is holding all things together. Literally, the things that are holding my body together, that are holding not just my physical realm, but all of my relational realms, is laminin. It's a cell adhesion molecule that I think is fascinating for all of us to really ponder. But what are the parallel applications of what we're talking about today? What are the things that I can take home? Because outside of the science and outside of just the interesting facts of Colossae, where's the relevance of this message today? Where's the relevance of this series for me today, or for you today, as you sit listening and pondering and reflecting? The first one is, anytime that you're in the middle of the circle, or anytime that you're even on the outside of the circle, you know the best posture for each of us to take? We can't stand straight up. We stand straight up, we lose complete control. If we're on that merry-go-round and we're on the outside of that merry-go-round and it starts to fly really fast, or if we're in a season of change and we're just going really fast, the second I stand up, what happens to me? I fall off. The best posture for all of us to take is a low center of gravity, a low posture. Because in that low center of gravity, I'm recognizing that he is above all things. Second thing that I need to really think about is keeping a focus on one specific point. Because if I start to wander off in my eyes and I start to look at the horizon, or I start to look at the geese, or I start to look at the tree line, you know what happens to me? I blow chunks. I lose it. I start to fall over. Why? Because I'm not focused on a stationary point. And our stationary point in the seasons of change, in the cycles of change, is only one person. It's Christ, because he is supreme. He is above all things, and he is through all things. He is holding all things together. And this brings me to my third application. When you're feeling pulled in different directions in life, listen, I completely understand that, and that is supposed to be natural. Because when you're spinning in that circle, when you're on the outside of that circle and it's going really fast, here's what's working against you. You have three forces against you. You have a gravitational push that's pushing you down. You have a centrifugal force that's pushing you out. And then you have a centripetal force that's pulling you in. And that's just amazing to me that we have a network of forces constantly pulling on us. Some of you just don't understand how your life can have spun so fast or so quickly out of control. It's because things are pulling against you. Things are pushing against you. Things are pushing down on you. Why? Because it's natural. That's just nature. If I had a rope and I started to swing it, that would represent too many of our lives. And what it represents is that there's a net force constantly pushing and pulling and pushing. But through it all, the strongest force in that whole circle is the one that's on the inside. It's the force that's pulling you in. It's the centripetal force. It's the greatest force in that whole circle, which tells me that when we're spinning out of control, we are being drawn to the center. Jesus is using that cycle. He's using that change to draw you into him. And the further you are away from the center, the faster your life is going to be spinning out of control. That's just the reality of life. And for some of you, you need to come back home. You need to come back to that center point. You need to come back to where Jesus began it all for you. The question for you is, how long are you going to wait? How long are you going to let your life spin out of control before you finally just fall to your knees and say, Jesus, I need you. I'm so dependent on you right now. Or are you going to just keep trying to do it yourself? You will not, cannot, and are not designed to manage the circle. The circle's constant, but in that, he is too. My challenge to you, my invitation to you is, if you need to make a decision today because you need to just come back home, come back to center, we're here. Let's start that conversation today. Do not wait anymore. Lord, I pray right now that you would be with the people in this group, in this room, and who are watching online. That if you're speaking to someone because their life is just spinning out of control and it's spinning in chaos, I just pray, Lord, that you would begin to wrestle them and reel them back home, that you would draw them back in, that they would depend fully on you, that they would keep the right posture, that they would bow down. They would say, you are supreme, you are above all things, you are the image. If they don't know how to hold on, they just finally let go. They would ask you to hold them tight because we know that you're holding us. And that you would begin to work us back to you. In Christ's name, amen.
Everybody hopes that maybe somewhere down this road we'd finally find that place where we belong. That place where we're complete, the one that occupies our dreams, that place we're lucky to call our home. Well, I have arrived, and I can't keep this inside. So I raise my hands and shout your name, and praise you with my song. My dreams at hand, I found my place, the place where I belong. Everybody tries to find the purpose for their life in hopes that one more day is justified. But once you truly see the very reason why you breathe, it becomes so much more than getting by. Well, I have arrived, and I can't keep this inside. So I raise my hands and shout your name, and praise you with my song. My dreams at hand, I found my place, the place where I belong. So I raise my hands and shout your name, and praise you with my song. My dreams at hand, I found my place, the place where